the things that led me initially to have concern about everything was much earlier in 2020. And I can't remember exactly when I began. I started looking at our voter rolls, and I did some fairly simplistic research on the population of Fulton County, Georgia. And what I found out, and of course started pressing that with the elections department, through subsequent monthly meetings, etc., was that the numbers that I was able to ascertain, we had more voters on the active voter rolls than we did of the population of the entirety of Fulton County, and then extrapolating for those of voting age. So that became a major concern of mine, and frankly, lasted throughout and continued even after the 2020 election. So that was a big issue, and of course, inside that 2020 timeframe, really there was nothing done to. Wasn't time, and I understand all of that, but there was nothing done to answer my questions on that. And that I thought, well, look, it's only fair to the voters of Fulton County that, we're having clean voter rolls here so that nobody's vote, is disparaged because, somebody may have come in and voted that, frankly, legally should not be able to. So I think that's very, very important for the be Fulton County or anywhere in the country. But from that, in the 2020 election itself, I had and other board members had requested that we obtain the chain of custody documentation from the department. And none of that was ever delivered. It was not delivered at the time of request leading up to the election, and was certainly not given. We weren't giving any. Was given nothing. Even leading up to the certification.
Let me interrupt you right there, Mr. Wingate, and ask to explain for the committee what you mean by chain of custody documents.
Okay. In the election staff, we had many components in many areas where absentee by mail ballots were being delivered to, and then picked up and then centralized to the processing center. And then, of course, there's documentation so that whoever is handing those envelopes, in that case, off to, then it's there to sign off that they've delivered to this person, and the transportation or transport of those documents, which goes on daily, in case you're not familiar, in the election cycle. And then once they are delivered to the location that they're destined to, there is another signature required on a document that shows that, where it was picked up, driven to, delivered to, and then signed off on as received. And this is going on for multiple locations daily. And, in terms of the memory cards that are being delivered so that they can be kept, in security, there's the same level chain of custody documentation that is delivered for all of the memory cards coming in from early voting locations, and of course on election day from each of the precincts.
All right.
So that's fundamentally what that encompasses.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much. I interrupted you to get that, so pick back up where you were talking about asking for and not receiving chain of custody documents.
Okay, well, that, since we asked and did not receive any of it, that to me is just one reason. Well, how can I trust, as a board member to certify this election when I cannot receive even a sampling, anything at all with regards to chain of custody documents? So that was just another one of the things in my mind leading up to certification that was something that certainly was not fulfilled. There was also for that election the advent of this whole Dropbox circumstance was unveiled, and then we had I think Fulton County, we had like 36 or so drop boxes located around the county. And these drop boxes at that particular point were set outside of an early voting location, which means that they're in the elements. They're 24 hours a day, but there were surveillance cameras as required that supposedly, were operating 24/7 so that they could be monitored, and anybody tried to do any damage or anything nefarious to any of those locations, that could be looked at, and hopefully somebody sent out there to secure the situation. But we'd ask for not every surveillance tape, but ask for to see surveillance tapes on basically, whatever, just give us some samplings of that so we can take a look at it, because I knew that this was going to be an important issue because of all the hullabaloo that any of us that were alive in those days, was witnessing as being an issue. And from that request, again, to just, the way in which it turned out, there was never one surveillance tape, an inch of footage that was ever delivered to the board. And if it was delivered to anybody, it certainly was not any board member that I was aware of or made me aware of. So that was what was another issue. The other issue we had down here was this whole questioning of ballots underneath a table and then being pulled out on election night, excuse me, at State Farm Arena. Well, we did see on television, by the way, we did see that surveillance tape. And of course, I, as a board member and knowing most all of those people who were in that room that night, I didn't make any judgment as to what was going on. It wasn't, I had no basis to do that. But I did see it. And of course, I asked the questions of our director. And this was, I believe, the day following Election Day. And, his response was, well, he just hasn't had time to look into this, but he will and get back to us. Well, there was nothing ever gotten back to, at least to me as a board member, that had any explanation of that election night at State Farm Arena. And we got to certification, and there was still no response to that. Did not know, still being investigated. Exactly. Well, I think the director, in my opinion, and still believe that to this day, could have, stated, look, I've talked to everybody and this is what transpired. I firmly believe that should have been done by the then director, but it was not. And the last thing was, well, not the last thing, but the big, what I call the 4 or 5 things that prevented me from certifying was we had such a huge number of absentee by mail ballots. And those ballots, we as the department and the board, and then the board of commissioners who has to approve, certain expenditures, because it was, becoming very clear that there was going to be a larger amount of absentee by mail ballots this election year than by far than in previous years. So they determined a system that is called Bluecrest. And the Bluecrest platform primarily was an absentee by mail or a paper ballot processing application. And that would, scan in the outer oath envelopes. It would open them. It would then pull them out. It would flatten them, as they call it, and then put them in bundles for, excuse me, for later processing and scanning. Part of that, or one of the applications or elements of that Bluecrest platform, was an electronic signature verification component. And of course, we all, as that was reported, we all thought that that was going to be up and running, and how, excuse me, how exactly that the department, the people uh, 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 there for managing the absentee by mail ballot processing would have a very fine function in the electronic signature verification component. Well, as I recall, I believe that time frame was in October at the board meeting for October. I had asked the question, where are we with regards to the functionality of the electronic signature verification component? And I was told that the um, technicians from Blue Crest were in our building that day, and that they were working to functionalize the electronic signature verification component.
When you
Well,
say functionality and functionalize, what's the plain English meaning of that?
meaning getting it to work,
Thank you.
if
All
that
right.
makes sense. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was unclear. That they were in there to make the thing work.
Okay.
And, we certainly, as we would let, the board meeting concluded, we went on, but after the fact, we were not told in between that October date and then, of course, about a month later, the election itself. At least I was not told that they did not get it to work. So, somewhere along the line, and I am sorry, I can't remember exactly when it was, but I had asked the question, well, okay, well, what did we do for signature verification? And the comment I got back was, which frankly at that time floored me, was, well, we didn't do any. And I remember I forget where I was, I was on a phone call, I forget exactly, and I apologize, it's been so long. But, I do remember that comment that, we didn't do any. Now, of course, I took that saying, all right, well, by law, you've got to do signature verification. You've got to at least have somebody looking at this. And one side of that is that the whomever you have that is looking at and supposed to be, verifying signature, that if there is no signature on the oath envelope, then how are you curing it, or what are you doing with them? And I remember going down, on from that and said, well, there weren't many, so we just sent them back out, and if they reply on time, then they'll get their vote counted. Well, I thought that was a little weak, but anyway, that's as I recall, that's what I was told.
All right, sir.
Those are primarily, ladies and gentlemen, that was primarily in my mind and in my reasoning, why I was not comfortable, in certifying.
All right, sir. And what was the vote on certification? What was the vote total on certification when the board voted?
Well, there were two in the board. There's two Republicans, two Democrats, and then supposedly, which doesn't always work that way, an independent or a nonpartisan chair. The vote was 3 to certify and 2 against.
And that was for both certification votes?
That's yes. Yeah.
All right. And do you have an understanding of how much the Blue Crest system cost the county?
Yeah, and again, I can't be precise, but it seems to me like the entire platform was a little over $1 million, $1 million.
And
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to clear my throat. To your knowledge, did they ever get it working?
To my knowledge, no. It obviously did not work leading up to and going through any of the 2020 elections. And it was not, I don't believe I don't believe it was working either, for the runoffs that we had coming out of 2020 elections.
Did they ever get it working in a later election while you were on the board?
To my knowledge, no.
Do you have a
we had asked, I'm sorry, we had asked a couple of times and had gotten a response that no, but there was no pressure on them after the 2020 election and runoffs to do that.
Do you recall approximately how many absentee ballots were counted in Fulton County in the November 2020 presidential election?
Yeah, it was, I think a few more than 147,000, as I recall.
I don't know what the FBI did.
Well, I want you to.
I do know from my own experience that the FBI didn't do a lot with regard to the election matters at hand. There are thousands of affidavits that were submitted that never got investigated. So, you know, the statement that everything was okay about something that they never looked into deeply, I don't know what they did. I have no idea. Telling me that they issued some political statement saying everything is okay doesn't convince me that everything was okay. You show me some detailed analysis and description of what they did, and we can talk about it. But I do not accept that the FBI rigorously investigated any of these matters.
Okay.
Particularly after it was obvious that the election was, the election decisions were going to go ahead as decided.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.